Good evening and welcome everyone. The session will start shortly. We'll just wait a second or two to get everyone into the room. We're very happy to greet you here this evening for the webinar on do's and don'ts of buying a condo. In this time, I'll just take a few moments to give some tips before we get started. We recommend that you, if you're on a VPN, to disconnect because sometimes that causes a few glitches, and close some unnecessary applications if you have them open. Just to let you know, there will be a question period at the end of the session, so we ask that you keep your questions to the end, and you can use the chat located at the bottom of your screen to write your questions in. We'll be watching those. If by any chance we don't get to your questions, because there's a large number of you on this call, we'll do our best to do as much as we can. But if your question doesn't get answered, I will put an email address in the chat shortly so you can send your questions. I just want to announce also that this session is being recorded, and you will be receiving the replay within 24 hours. So just a word now about the Chambre des Notaires, contributing to the excellence of notarial practice, encouraging the continuous development of the law, and promoting access to preventive justice are all missions of the Chambre des Notaires, and that drive its overarching objective of protecting the public. Legal advisors focused on the conciliation. With so much information available out there, notaries are key public officers who can help the public understand what they need to know, make the best decisions, protect their patrimony, and ensure that their wishes are known and respected. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Sophie Krasiota. She's a notary practicing in real estate law, an alumni of McGill University, so we're very happy to greet her back to our turf, and a graduate of the certificate degree in urban planning in the University of Montreal. And she has a bachelor's degree in law and a graduate degree in notarial law from the University of Montreal, and is now a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Law at the University of Quebec in Montreal. So without further ado, Sophie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lucy. So good evening, everyone. It's really a great pleasure for me to speak before you today to give you advice on the purchase of a condo. Thank you very much to McGill University for the invitation. And I think it's really a great subject because people most definitely need to be informed of the things they should look into when buying a condo, because it is very different from an individual house. So a condo project has a legal framework which applies to it, which is what you will learn a little bit more about in the second webinar. And also condo has all of our management to it. So this will be a more, I'm sorry, I haven't done a presentation in English for quite some time, so I'm a little bit nervous tonight, but everything will be okay. So as I was saying, a condo project has a legal framework which applies to it, which you will learn more about in the second webinar. And also there is the whole management of the project, which needs to be considered when you want to learn about, which you will learn about in the last webinar. So I strongly suggest that you attend all the 3 webinars of the condo series to have a good idea of what divided co-ownership consists of in the province of Quebec. Also, as it was said at the beginning, we will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. But if you have any questions relating to the management of a co-ownership or the rules applying to it, including the recourses, I suggest you ask these questions in the 2 other webinars, so you'll have experts that will be able to answer them for you. So today we will really focus on the elements you should look into as a person who wants to buy a condo. So as I was presented, so I'm a notary working for the firm Cain Lamar in a real estate department. Just my practice focuses mainly on divided co-ownership laws, so what we commonly refer to as condo. So I draft legal documents in this field in addition to doing some transactions in new condominium projects. But aside from practicing divided co-ownership law, I also give legal advice with regards to urban planning regulations, having done, as was said earlier, a master's degree in this field before studying law. So, and my PhD thesis will combine both co-ownership law and urban planning, which are really two fields that are of a great interest for me. So as you can probably see from the urban landscape in and around the city of Montreal over the past few years, there are more and more condominium projects. There are a few explanations for this phenomenon, one of which is the densification policies of cities, which objective is to limit urban sprawl to reduce the impacts of development on the environment. There are a variety of types of condominium projects. Some are small and large, and we have also large complexes. Some offer many amenities like pools, gyms, and urban chalets. There are new projects that are being built as condominiums, but we also see that existing buildings are being converted into condominiums. So for example, we often see old industrial buildings or duplexes being converted into condominiums. So there's a variety of types of projects, and some are more complicated than others in their legal structures, and every project is different and has its own particularities. So this is important to keep that in mind when you want to buy a condo unit, because each project is different. So the objective of today's webinar is to give you advice on what you should have on your checklist of elements when reflecting upon purchasing a condo. So aside from the usual that everybody would think of when buying a property, like location, price, amenities, the layout, so the general feel of the place, to enable you to make an informed decision with regards to your investment. So the checklist that will be provided today is not exhaustive, but it will help you to have an idea of the questions you should ask and the information you should look into in your purchasing process to be able to make the best decision. So here is today's agenda for the webinar. We will first discuss briefly what is a condo in legal terms. So it is called a fraction of divided co-ownership, and it is composed of different elements, which we will see in a few minutes. So we'll talk about what is the private portion, the common portion, and also what are common portions for restricted use. So we will not see all of the rules applying to divided co-ownership, because this is the subject of the second webinar, like I said earlier, but it is important to understand what a condo legally consists of, so in terms of what it is composed of in the context of this webinar, because it is the object of the purchase, which we will discuss this evening. Therefore, we will see together the definitions provided for by the Civil Code of Quebec for each of the elements that are listed under our first subject. We will then enter into the core of the webinar with a discussion of the elements that a buyer should have on his checklist. So we will discuss the importance of consulting the Declaration of Co-Ownership, which is the governing document of a condo project. So every condo project will have this document, and it is very important to consult it. We'll also talk about the bylaws of the co-ownership. We will say a few words on the certificate of location, and we will end this section with questions that should be addressed to the syndicate of co-owners to have additional information regarding the condo that you intend to buy. The last subject of the webinar for today will be on the purchase of a condo from a developer or a builder. So the usual case scenario is when you want to buy a condo based on architectural plans for a project to be built in the future. So the Civil Code of Quebec provides a legal framework work when a person wants to acquire a condo to occupy it himself from a builder or a developer, which has been recently modified with the passing of Bill 16. Therefore, I will say a few words on the obligations imposed by law with regards to two important documents required in this type of sales. So that you have the preliminary contract and the memorandum. And I will also discuss the new requirements of the law which apply to the deposits that are made by a buyer towards the purchase of a new condo. These elements that we will see are, in my opinion, important to know for a buyer who intends to buy a condo in a new project. And finally, we will end the webinar with a short conclusion and take some time for some questions. So let's begin with our first subject for today, which is what is a fraction of divided co-ownership. So as I previously said, it is the legal term to what we commonly refer to as a condo, and it is composed of several elements defined by the Civil Code of Quebec. So first of all, we have what we call the private portion. So the law defines the private portion as being portions of the building and land that are owned by a specific co-owner and are for his exclusive use. So a private portion is divided on a cadastral plan. Therefore, it has a lot number and specific dimensions, as you can see in the examples on the slide, and the purchaser will be the exclusive owner of his portion of the project. So if we look at each of the examples, just to illustrate what a private portion could be. So in the first cadastral plan on the slide, the private portion represents the unit. So this is what you see inside the red circle. This is the type of cadastral plan that we usually see in what we call a vertical co-ownership, which is basically a co-ownership in a building with many stories. In the second cadastral plan, the private portion is the rectangle in the red circle, and it contains, in this case, a building and part of the land which is not represented on the cadastral plan, but in reality, if we would go on the site, what we would find within the limits of this rectangle on this property would be in fact a building and a piece of land. Therefore, if you would buy this unit in this co-ownership, you would be the exclusive owner of the building and the land found within the limits of this rectangle. So this is a type of cadastral plan that is usually what we see in a horizontal co-ownership, which means basically that it's a co-ownership where a piece of land is divided horizontally into private and common portions. An example of this type of co-ownership would be a project of townhouses. Then we have what we call the common portions. So the Civil Code of Quebec states that they are the portions of the building and land that are owned by all the co-owners and serve for their common use. So common portions are also represented on a cadastral plan, and you may have to verify also the declaration of co-ownership to know what they are composed of. So as a co-owner of a fraction of divided co-ownership, you will have a share in the common portions, which is determined by certain criteria defined by the law and which can be found in the summarizing table provided in the declaration of co-ownership, as is shown in the example on the slide. So in this table, you find in the first column the lot number associated to the private portion. Then in the second column, we find the address corresponding to the private portion. The third column is the relative value associated to the condo. So it corresponds to your share in the common portions and your contribution to the common expenses. So it's an important information to know. And the last column is the number of voices you would have at a meeting of the co-owners. So this summarizing table in the Declaration of Co-Ownership is important to consult because it gives you valuable information with regards to the condo you would like to buy. And finally, what we have is what we call a common portion for restricted use, which vary from one project to another, and there might be even projects in which there are none. So the Civil Code defines them as being part of the common portions, so they will be within the limits of the cadastral plans of the common portions, which serve for the use of certain or only one of the co-owners. So the usual examples of common portion for restricted use that we have in projects are lockers and parking spaces. However, we often see in some projects that parking spaces can be also private portions. And in that case, as we have seen earlier, they would have a separate lot number on a cadastral plan, and you would be the exclusive owner of this parking space. If an element in a project such as a locker, for example, is defined as a common portion for restricted use in a unit you intend to buy, it means that your locker is part of the common portions, but you would have only you would have its exclusive use. So just to summarize this section, buying a condo means that you are buying, in legal terms, a fraction of divided co-ownership, which will be composed of the private portion, which has a lot number and which you will be the exclusive owner, and a share in the common portions, which you can find in the summarizing table in the Declaration of Co-Ownership. And you may also have the use of common portions for restricted use, like lockers or parking spaces, depending on the project. So you would have to check with the project because one project varies from another. So this is for our first section. So now that we understand what a condo legally consists of, let's now see what are the elements that you should verify with regards to this condo that you would like to purchase. So the first element on your checklist would be to consult the Declaration of Co-Ownership, which is, as I said earlier, the governing document of the project. So it's a pretty extensive document, so I would strongly advise you to consult a notary to help you understand it and who will be able to make further verifications of this document. But I just listed a few questions that should be of interest to you with regards to the Declaration of Co-Ownership that you should keep in mind. So first of all, before analyzing the Declaration of Co-Ownership, you would have to question yourself, to question if the condo is subject to one or more declarations of co-ownership. So this will be determined by the structure of the project. So in many projects, there's only one declaration of co-ownership, but in some projects, sometimes with phases, there will be two declarations of co-ownerships which will apply to your condo, which means that there will be two syndicates of co-owners, two general meetings of co-owners each year. So in this case scenario, you would have to consult two declarations of co-ownership. I did not provide information on the different structures of co-ownership because there's a lot of possibilities and it's very complicated, but you could always consult the notary just to make sure that you understand the legal framework and the structure of the condo you would like to buy. Also, you could want to look into the summarizing table that we have seen earlier in order to see what is the lot number of the private portion and the address corresponding to it. As we have also seen earlier, you will be able to see in this table what is the share of the common portions associated to the condo. In addition, you would also want to see what are the rights of common use in the common portions for restricted use. So are you allowed to use a locker, parking spaces, balconies? So you would have to look into the declaration of co-ownership to see that. And also you would like to know what are the costs related to them. So the Civil Code provides that the declaration of co-ownership may determine a different apportionment of the co-owner's contribution to the expenses for major repairs of common portions for restricted use and for the replacement of those portions, which means that you may be responsible for the payment of major repairs and replacements of these common portions. It is therefore important to verify this information in the declaration of co-ownership. If nothing is provided for, that they will be paid for by the contingency fund. So it's an important element to verify. Sometimes it can be a little bit complicated. So again, a notary could certainly help you analyze this section of the declaration of co-ownership. Inside this document, you would also have the information with regards to the minimum amount required for your civil liability insurance as a co-owner. So a recent government regulation provides that the minimum amount of liability insurance that each co-owner must take out is $1 million if the project has fewer than 13 fractions. And it is $2 million if it has 13 or more fractions. So this is the minimum amount required by government regulation, but the declaration of co-ownership might indicate a higher amount. And in that case, it is the amount required by the declaration of co-ownership which would apply. And finally, with regards to the declaration of co-ownership, it would be important to verify if there were any amendments that were made to it. So if there were any amendments registered or to be registered at the land registry office. So for sure, a notary will look at this when he does the transaction, but the declaration of co-ownership might have been modified over the years. Therefore, it is important to check if there were any amendments made to it to have an overview of what is really in force. In addition, some amendments may have been voted but not yet registered. Therefore, it would be important to ask the syndicate if it is the case, just to make sure that we have a document that is up to date. Then the second element on your checklist would be to verify the bylaws of the co-ownership, which can be found inside the declaration of co-ownership. So it's a section of this document. It is usually divided into different subsections. So usually we have bylaws applying to the private portions, the ones applying to the common portions, and we can also have the bylaws applying to the common portions for restricted use. So it is important to ask the syndicate to have a copy of the bylaws which are also in the registers of the co-ownership, because there might have been new bylaws that have been passed or old bylaws that might have been amended or might no longer be in force since the declaration of co-ownership was registered at the land registry office. So it's important to ask to have the bylaws which were passed over the years, to have a document which is up to date. Also, taking cognizance of the bylaws is important because co-owners must abide by them, and some declarations of co-ownership contain penal clauses which apply if you don't respect them. Therefore, you could be subject to a fine. Also, bylaws may contain restrictions which might not enable you to do what you would have wanted inside the condo you want to purchase. For example, if you intend to buy a condo to do some short-term renting, the bylaws might stipulate that only long-term renting is authorized with a 12-month lease. Therefore, I strongly advise you to consult the bylaws which apply to the condo before buying it to make sure that they suit your needs and your plans that you have for your investment. So the third element on your checklist would be to take cognizance of the certificate of location. So the transaction for the condo will require a certificate of location that is up to date. If the certificate of location does not represent the actual state of the property, a new certificate of location will be required. In addition, if the certificate of location is on part of a lot number, it will no longer be up to date because of the cadastral renovation, and therefore a new certificate of location will be required. Also, you should look at the date of their certificate of location. If it is older than 10 years, a new certificate of location might be required. And furthermore, it would be cautious to verify if your mortgage creditor has specific requirements with regards to your certificate of location, since some of them may require that the certificate of location be, for example, no older than 7 years. So it would be important just to check with your creditor if they have specific requirements with regard to the certificate of location. If they have, it is a requirement of the mortgage creditor to have a new certificate. The certificate of location could probably be at the cost of the buyer, but it is something that could be discussed with the vendor and the broker during the negotiation of for the selling of the condo. You should also check in the offer to purchase if the certificate of location provided is on the private portion or if it is a global certificate of location, which is briefly on the whole property. So usually the offer to purchase will state that it is only on the private portion. So you should ask the syndicate of co-owners if they have a global certificate of location in their registers to verify if everything is okay with the property in terms of conformity. I would also advise you to read the certificate of location to see if the land surveyor has raised any irregularities with regards to the condo. He will have analyzed in particular if the certificate of location matches the cadastral plans and if there are any encroachments on private and common portions, for example. So with regards to the certificate of location, it can be very complicated to analyze this document. Therefore, I would strongly advise you to consult a notary to have them verified for you to make sure that everything is okay with the property that you intend to buy.
C'est good, Shmo. J'ai accès maintenant.
The fourth element on your checklist would be to question the syndicate of co-owners about the co-ownership to have an idea of its overall management over the years. You have to remember that in a condo project, you are not the sole owner of the building, nor are you the sole decision maker. So it's important to have as much information as possible in order to make an informed decision with regards to your purchase. So first of all, it would be important to have information on the state of the building. So you should verify carefully the vendor's declarations and question the vendor and the syndicate if there is work to be done eminently, and if so, will there be special contributions to be paid? You can also ask what was the work done to the building in the past. In addition, you could ask if there is a maintenance log. So this log will become mandatory as soon as the obligation passed with Bill 16 will come into force, but some declarations of co-ownership already impose this obligation. Therefore, you could, if the co-ownership has a maintenance log, you could certainly have a lot of information on the general state of the building with this log. So it is also important to have an overview of the financial situation of the co-ownership. So first, you should definitely request the syndicate a statement of the common expenses due. The civil code states that a person who acquires a condo is bound to pay all common expenses due with respect to the condo with interest at the time of the acquisition. However, if the purchaser asks for the statement of common expenses due and that the syndicate does not respond to his request within 15 days, the syndicate cannot claim the common expenses due by the previous owner to the purchaser of the condo. So it's really important to ask this document to the syndicate. Also, you should question the syndicate to know if there are special contributions that are coming up. The Civil Code does not provide for who should pay the special contribution, so it is a negotiation that may take place between the parties during the transaction, well, before the transaction, I mean. So it would be important to know if there are special contributions coming up because it will have an impact on your investment. Also, you should question what is the state of the contingency fund. So a study of the contingency fund will be required by law shortly. If there is not enough money in the contingency fund, and for example, there's work that needs to be done to the building, so there might be special contributions that will have to be paid, which will inevitably have an impact on your investments. So it's very important to check if there is money inside the contingency fund. And finally, you should ask the syndicate if there is a self-insurance fund. So this is a new fund that will be mandatory as of April 15, 2022. This fund is to be used to pay the deductibles provided for by the insurance taken out by the syndicate. So some co-ownerships have already begun to put money into this fund, so they have already created it. But if it's not the case, be advised that this fund will have to be created as of next year, and so money will have to be put inside this fund as of April 15, 2022. So you should then also consult the registers of the co-ownership. So it will enable you to have a lot of information. For example, it could enable you to verify the locker and parking numbers associated to your unit if there is such a locker and parking space that comes with your unit. You may also ask the syndicate if any work was done to your condo that you intend to buy, because you are responsible of taking out insurance on the improvements made to your private portion. So it is therefore important to know what were the improvements that were made to the condo over the years. In addition, work done to a private portion must be approved by the board of directors or the meeting of the co-owners if it also included work to the common portions or if the declaration of co-ownership prescribes this. So if work was not approved, the syndicate could ask the co-owner to undo the work, so which would inevitably cost you money. To identify the improvements that were made to your condo, the law now requires registers to contain a description of the private portions that is sufficiently precise to allow any improvements made by a co-owner to be identified. You should therefore ask for this description. It would enable you to identify the improvements that were made to your private portion and therefore be able to take out insurance on them. You should also ask a copy of the minutes and resolutions of the meetings of the co-owners and the board of directors. So this will give you a lot of information and will enable you to see, for example, if there was decisions regarding work to be done or work that was done in the past, what were the bylaws that were amended or passed. So you will have a lot of information inside these documents. And finally, you may also ask to see copies of the budget to verify the condo fees and the general financial situation of the co-ownership. Another question that you could ask is there any proceedings by or against the syndicate? So this is to be informed if there are any legal problems with regards to the co-ownership. And the final question that you could ask the syndicate is to check if they have insurance. So the insurance of the syndicate must comply with the requirements of the law. So generally, just briefly, the syndicate must have insurance which covers the whole immovable, the whole property, including the private portions, but excluding the improvements made by a co-owner to his portion, where they can be identified in relation to the description of that portion. The amount covered by the insurance must cover the reconstruction of the property and must be evaluated every 5 years by a member of l'Ordre des évaluateurs agréés du Québec. The insurance policy must also at least cover the risk prescribed by government regulation, which are provided in the list on the slide. So it's the last point that is written. So what is important to do is to ask the syndicate that they have an insurance policy, and a notary would be able to verify the rest for you. And so in this section, all the checklist points provided might be difficult for you to analyze them by yourself, but they're really important to check. And therefore, I would strongly advise you to consult a notary to help you analyze all of these documents so that you have all of the information to make a good decision with regards to the property that you would want to buy, so that you don't have any surprises in the near future. So let's move on to our final section, which is buying a condo from a builder or a developer. So this section will be on a few rules provided in the Civil Code of Quebec, which apply if you want to buy a residential condo to occupy it yourself in a new complex from a builder or a developer. So we will not look at all the rules which apply to this context because of lack of time, but we'll rather browse through the main ones which a buyer should be advised on. And in this section, you'll see I put the articles of the Civil Code of Quebec, but I'll see to summarize them for you just to give you an overview of what is important to remember. So first of all, when you want to buy a new condo, so on plan, for example, that is going to be built from a builder or a developer, the Civil Code requires that there be a preliminary contract. So the preliminary contract, the Civil Code of Quebec provides that it must include a stipulation that the promisor may withdraw within 10 days after signing it. So this means that following the signing of the preliminary contract for the condo that you would have wanted to buy, you have 10 days to withdraw from the contract if you decide to no longer buy the unit. In addition, the Civil Code states that if a memorandum, so this is a document that we will see just after the preliminary contract, which is required when there's a condo building that will be built and sold. So if this memorandum is not given to the promisor at the time the preliminary contract is signed, he may withdraw his promise until he receives the memorandum or within 10 days of receiving it. So you will have 10 days to withdraw from your promise from the time you have signed the contract if the developer, for example, doesn't give you the memorandum at the time of the signing. So you will have until you receive this memorandum or 10 days after receiving it to withdraw from the contract. So the Civil Code also provides information, mandatory information that needs to be inside this contract. So we need the name and address of the seller and of the promisor, the work that need to be performed, the sales price, the date of delivery, and the real rights charging the property, in addition to any useful information pertaining to the characteristics of the property. And also, if the sales price is subject to review, the preliminary contract has to contain the terms and conditions of review. It is also important to note that the preliminary contract may provide for an indemnity in case of the exercise of the right of withdrawal that we just seen before. So therefore, if you decide to withdraw from the contract within the 10 days that you're allowed to, or if you did not receive the memorandum until you've received the memorandum or 10 days after receiving it, you may have to pay an indemnity which may not exceed 0.5% of the agreed sales price. So my advice to you would be, before signing the preliminary contract, you should look if you will have to pay an indemnity in case you exercise your right of withdrawal. So that was for the preliminary contract. Now let's see for the memorandum. So the Civil Code indicates that a memorandum is required for the sale of a condo. So it must be given by the seller to the promisor at the time of the signing of the preliminary contract. So what is a memorandum? So it is a document which includes the following information. So you will have the professionals who are implicated in the project, so the name of the architects, the engineers, the builders, and the developers. You will have a plan of the overall property development project and, where applicable, the general development plan of the project. There's also going to be a summary of the descriptive specifications and the budget forecast. So you will be able to have what will be your condo fees for the projected unit. It indicates also the common facilities and contain information on the management of the property. It also indicates if there is where applicable, if there is a guarantee plan covering the project, and if there is one, the manner in which the promisor can consult that plan. So since the declaration of co-ownership will not have been registered at the time you would sign the preliminary contract, the Civil Code provides that a summary of the declaration of co-ownership and of the bylaws must be provided with the memorandum. So you will have a summary of what the declaration of co-ownership will be, and also what the bylaws will contain. So all of these documents are really important to consult, to have an overview of the project to be built. So you could ask a notary to help you revise these documents to make sure that you really understand them, and they can be pretty extensive also, so sometimes they're complicated to comprehend. So for sure, a notary could help you review them to make sure that everything is clear for you. So the final element that I wanted to see with you today with regards to the purchase of a new condo unit from a builder or developer would be to talk about, well, the deposits. A developer or a builder usually usually requires deposits be made at different moments during the construction. So the Civil Code of Quebec has a new rule stating that any deposit paid to a builder or a developer toward the purchase of a condo must be fully protected by one or more of the following means. So a guarantee plan, insurance, a certificate, or a deposit in an interest account of a member of a professional order according to the terms and conditions determined by government regulation. It is therefore important to inform yourself on how your deposit will be protected before giving it. In some projects, deposit will be made in the interest account of a notary, but in others, they may be given directly to a developer if the developer has, for example, a guarantee plan which protects these deposits. But in that case, it would be cautious to verify with the guarantee plan what is the maximum amount that is protected by the plan to make sure that all of your deposit is fully protected, since guarantee plans may have limits to their protection. So this concludes the final section of today's webinar. So to conclude today's presentation, here would be my final advice for you before signing a promise to purchase. So I would strongly recommend you consult a notary to review the legal documents pertaining to the condo. Some projects may be very complicated in their legal structures. Therefore, a notary certainly could help you to verify these documents and explain them to you. As you would consult an inspector to verify the state of the property you would like to buy, it would be safe to consult a notary to verify the legal framework of the co-ownership and that everything is okay. I would also advise you to carefully read the vendor's declarations. These contain important information with regards to problems that there might have been in the past or current problems that currently exist, which leads me to my next point, which is not to hesitate to ask questions to the vendor and the syndicate about the co-ownership. So what is its financial situation, the state of the building, the work that was done, and the work that will need to be done in the future, and in how much time. So also how does the management of the co-ownership work? Is there a project manager, or is it managed only by co-owners? So asking questions is essential to have a general idea of how the co-ownership operates, because you always need to keep in mind that you will not be the sole decision maker, and that the decisions made in the past with regards to the co-ownership, for example, if there was lack of maintenance or not a lot of money in the maintenance in the contingency fund, might have a direct impact on your investment. Also, divided co-ownership law has undergone many modifications over the past few years, and there are other changes that are coming up, in particular with new government regulations which will be passed. Therefore, I would advise you to keep yourself informed about these new regulations that will be coming up if you want to buy a condo, or if you already live in a condo unit. And finally, my last advice would be just to ask yourself, is condo living made for you? So living in a condo complex is like living in a small community. The management of the property and the decisions made with regards to it will not only be made by you, like it would be in the case if you bought an individual house. In small complexes, you might have to implicate yourself more in the management of the co-ownership, and you will have greater proximity to the co-owners, whereas in a larger complex, you might feel a little bit more anonymous and might be a little bit less implicated in the project, since usually in large complexes, we have project managers. I would therefore advise you to think if condo living is made for you, and if so, what type of project would be a better fit for you? So this ends today's webinar. I hope I was able to give you useful tips to reflect upon in your purchasing process of a condo for you to make an informed decision with regards to your investment. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie, for this great presentation. And so now we'll get to the questions. But before we do that, I do want to acknowledge our gratitude towards the Chambre de Notaire for their support and for making this webinar possible. So now let's get to the questions. So the first one here is that the person is saying, I heard that buying a new condo isn't a good idea. Waiting at least 5 years enables structural building problems to surface. Is there any comments about that?
Well, this would be maybe a little more technical question with regards to the construction. It would be, I don't think I'm the right person to pronounce myself on if the time of the construction, for example, in this example, it's 5 years, if the delays in the constructions will have an impact on the construction itself. So I don't have the information to be able to pronounce myself on such a question.
Okay. All right, so then we move on to the next one. Are balconies sometimes considered a common portion for restricted use?
Yes, they are. Yes, we often see this, that balconies are common portions for restricted use. So it's really something that we frequently see. You have to check inside your declaration of co-ownership to see if they are identified as common portions for restricted use. So yes.
Okay. So the next question is, who can provide to a potential buyer access to the declaration of co-ownership? Is it only someone from the Chambre de Notaire to Quebec?
No, so the syndicate of co-owners should have a copy in the registers of the co-ownership. So for sure, they have a copy. So you could just, as a syndicate of co-ownership, to have a copy. Also, sometimes the brokers who sell the condo unit will have a copy during the negotiations or beforehand when you want to have more information on a condo unit that you're interested in buying. You may ask the broker to have a copy of the declaration of co-ownership, and usually he will have this copy for you. And important maybe to ask if they're to send you any amendments that were made to this declaration, just to make sure that you have really what is enforced right now.
Okay. Is the certificate of location required for a condo apartment or for condo project as a whole?
Okay, yeah. So this was the distinction between the certificate of location on the private portion and the certificate of location on the that we call, the global certificate of co-owner. The global certificate of location, which is on all of the project. So usually either or is okay for the transaction, but if we have the one from only the one from the private portion, usually it's the one that we have. We ask the syndicate of co-owners to see in the registers if they have the one on the project, just to make sure that everything is okay, that there's that there are no nothing that is not conformed with the property.
Okay. So here's our next question. Who creates the bylaws? The first condo committee?
Good question. So the first bylaws are created by the developer. So the first series of bylaws, they come inside the declaration of co-ownership. So when we register the declaration of co-ownership at the land registry office, that's the first set of bylaws. So it's the developer essentially that creates the first bylaws.
Okay. Then we have our next question. Does the insurance cover the upgrades purchased with the condo developer?
Usually, so the condo developer will have what we call the answer is no. So yeah, so the answer is no, that the upgrades, it has to be covered by your insurance.
Okay. If you buy from a builder and sell a year later, can he charge you with the pro rata deficit after this year if nothing has been voted?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. If you buy from a builder and sell a year later, can he charge you with the pro rata deficit after this year if nothing has been voted?
For the, well, I think it's with regards to the condo fees. I'm not sure. I'm just going to answer. I'm not sure if I'm going to answer the question the way it was asked. If not,
maybe the person can clarify.
Yeah, clarify by, or, but I think the, the condo fees will have to be paid by the owner of the building at the time that the condo fees will have to be paid by the owner at the time you are the owner of the building. So if you sell, I'm not too sure of the question, but maybe this person can write the question by email and I can respond to this afterwards. Yeah.
So here we have one, in a hot condo market where you have to make an offer quickly, when exactly are you supposed to consult a notary, review the certificate location, and ask the syndicate of all these questions? Can you add an addendum in your offer that is provisional on the receipt of all this information?
Yes, that's a really good question, because exactly with the market right now, usually we wouldn't have this kind of problem, because you would have time to consult all of these documents. But I think that would be a good idea, just to put a condition inside your offer to purchase that you want to verify all of these documents to your satisfaction, to be sure that everything is okay, so that if something is not okay with these legal documents, well, you have a way out of your offer.
Okay. If a builder goes bankrupt and is being replaced by a new one, are there concerns we should consider?
Well, the builder, now the deposits are fully protected by one of the means prescribed by law that we just saw. So it would be usually the thing that was really that people were I'm sorry, I'm looking for the word, concerned about was the protection of their deposits. And now the law came, there was an amendment made to the law stating that all of the deposits are protected. Therefore, if there's a developer that becomes bankrupt, well, your deposits are protected, so you will be able to have your deposits back.
Okay. Again, about all the questions here, can we ask all these questions and also get all the answers or documents prior to even signing a promissory note to buy a condo?
Well, for sure, the notary who will do the transaction will check these documents for you, but it's always preferable to check all of this beforehand to be sure that you have all of this information regarding the condo. So my advice would be for sure to consult before, just to make sure that everything is okay. Sometimes you may have condos that have legal structures which are really complicated. So just to make sure that everything is okay. Sometimes I know transactions go really, really quickly. So this year particularly, and last year's, but it would be more cautious to take the time to revise all of these documents for sure.
Okay. So Sophie, I'm going to ask you this question because I have a lot of people asking this, and I don't know if you're prepared to answer, but people are wanting to know if it's a good time to buy a condo this year.
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. I think it's a question of market. So I think people are concerned about their investment, because the condo units, well, properties in general, their prices have really gone up. So there are concerns with regards to if property will go down in the near future or in the future per se. So it's a good question. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know, but
Nobody does. But
yeah.
I just thought I would ask because
Yeah,
people...
but it's a really good question. If I had the answer, I would certainly
Well,
give it to you. Yeah.
okay, so back to more practical. If the builder makes a modification to your unit and doesn't notify the purchaser, what are the legal repercussions to hold them accountable?
Well, this is maybe I would direct this question to the next webinar, which is going to be held by a lawyer. So maybe you can ask him this question. Okay. But for sure, you can first of all discuss the situation with the developer, saying that it was not what was agreed upon, to see what can be done within the negotiation. So can there be the price? Can the sales price be diminished, or so you can see what can be negotiated with the seller, with the builder. I'm sorry, but with regards to the legal recourses, I would direct this question for the next presentation.
Okay. Sorry, just keeping watch of the time. It's already 6:30, so maybe I'll take one or two shorter questions, and for the rest, I will put in an email address here. So here's one. Is the seller responsible for paying the current special assessments prior to the notary date?
Is the seller... I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Is the seller responsible for paying the current special assessments prior to the notary date?
Yes, well, it's until the transaction. So yes, everything that is before the date that you will become the official owner. So that's when you become the official owner of the property, is when you sign the deed of sale. So prior to this, it's the previous owner, and after this, it's you, unless there was something that was negotiated between the parties. But the general rule is that you become responsible as of the date that you become the owner of the place.
Okay. Maybe one last one here. Should an inspection be done on a new condo?
Well, there's an inspection usually that is done in a new condo to see that everything is okay. So there's generally, in a new condo project, there's an inspection that is done. So you inspect the property with a person responsible in the developer's team. So just to make sure that everything is okay, was according to plans. And so yes, there's an inspection that is made.
Okay, perfect. So I think that's it. We've reached our end of the time. I want to thank you, Sophie. I want to thank everybody online for your great questions. And like I said, if your question didn't get answered, I have put an email address in the chat. Send that along. We'll forward those to Sophie, and she'll do her best to get to you. And again, I want to thank and acknowledge the Chambre de Notaire for making this all possible. And we look forward to seeing you in the next webinars. I have put the link. I'll put that again now, so you can register right away. And for more, get more of your answers questions. So with that, I will sign off, and I will just put this link here. And I want to thank everyone again, and have a great evening.